They called her too small, too weak, too worthless to fly. They laughed when she volunteered for the suicide mission. But when 340 Marines faced certain death and every pilot refused to go, this tiny bullied logistics officer revealed a secret that would change everything, forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you're watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The radio crackled with static and desperation. Mayday, mayday! This is Hawk 37. We are pinned down at grid Charlie 79. 340 Marines. Heavy casualties. We need immediate evac. Repeat, immediate evac! Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat in the corner of the operations tent at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, her small frame hunched over a clipboard. At 5'2" and barely 100 pounds, she looked more like a high school student than a Marine Corps officer. The green flight suit hung loose on her shoulders, and her boots, the smallest size the military issued, still felt too big. Did you hear that, Tiny? Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison sneered from across the room. His massive frame blocked the light as he walked past her desk, deliberately knocking her coffee cup with his elbow. The hot liquid spilled across her paperwork. Oops, my bad, Chen. Maybe if you were big enough to see, I wouldn't have bumped into you. The other men in the operations center laughed. They always laughed. Sarah said nothing. She grabbed a rag and started cleaning up the mess, her jaw tight. 3 years. 3 years of this. 3 years of being the punching bag, the joke, the woman who didn't belong. I still don't understand why they sent you here, Morrison continued, leaning against her desk. His coffee breath was hot on her face. This is a combat zone, not a daycare center. We need real Marines, not little girls playing dress-up. I'm qualified for this position, Sarah said quietly, not meeting his eyes. Qualified? Morrison laughed, slapping the desk. You're a logistics officer. You count supplies and file paperwork. My grandmother could do your job, and she's been dead for 5 years. More laughter rippled through the tent. Corporal Jensen joined in from his station. Hey, Morrison, maybe we should get her a booster seat. She can barely see over the desk. Or a stepladder, another voice called out. Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped up the coffee. She'd heard it all before. Every single day for 3 years. The jokes about her height, the comments about her weight, the constant questioning of why she was even there. Last week, someone had put a children's toy helicopter on her desk with a note. More your speed, Chen. The month before, Morrison had started a betting pool on how long until she quit and went home crying. She never quit. She never cried. Not where they could see. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was weaker, more desperate. Hawk 37 to any station. Enemy closing in. We have wounded who cannot move. Request immediate air support, anyone, please. Colonel Davidson, the base commander, stood at the tactical display. His weathered face was grim. Deep lines etched around his eyes. Options? Major Williams, the senior pilot, shook his head. He was a 20-year veteran with more than 3,000 flight hours. Sir, that position is hot, very hot. Intelligence shows at least 3 surface-to-air missile batteries in the area, plus heavy small arms fire. The weather is deteriorating. Sandstorm rolling in within the hour. And it's getting dark. What about our Ospreys? We have 2 operational MV-22s, sir. But neither pilot is willing to fly into that situation. It's a suicide mission. The approach is through a narrow valley with high winds, gusts up to 60 knots. There's no good landing zone. We'd be sitting ducks for every RPG and missile in the area. Colonel Davidson's fist hit the table, making the coffee cups jump. Those are our people out there. I understand, sir, but sending pilots to certain death won't help those Marines. We need to wait for proper air support from the carrier group. The F-18s can soften the target, and then maybe in 6 hours. 6 hours. The colonel's voice rose. They'll be dead in 2. Sarah stood up. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them still. Sir, I can go. The room fell silent. Then the laughter started again, louder this time. Did the coffee girl just speak? Morrison said, grinning. Chen, adults are talking. Go back to counting toilet paper or whatever it is you do. I'm a qualified pilot, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. I can fly the mission. Major Williams didn't even look at her. Chen, you're a logistics officer. You haven't flown a real mission in what, 3 years? And even then, you flew transport in safe zones. Milk runs. This isn't a training exercise. This is a hot combat extraction in deteriorating weather conditions with multiple threat vectors. I can do it, Sarah insisted. Colonel Davidson studied her for a moment. His eyes were kind but firm. Lieutenant Chen, I appreciate the volunteer spirit. I really do. But Major Williams is right. This requires an experienced combat pilot with recent flight hours in hostile conditions. We can't risk what? Sarah's voice cut through the room. Those 340 Marines are already dead if nobody goes. What exactly are we risking? Your life, Lieutenant, the colonel said firmly. And I won't order someone to their death just to make myself feel better. That's final. Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation in her chest. They didn't even consider her. Not for a second. Because she was small. Because she was a woman. Because she filed paperwork and counted supplies and didn't look like their idea of what a combat pilot should be. She saluted sharply and turned away, walking out of the operations tent into the dusty twilight. Behind her, she heard Morrison's voice. Can you believe that? She actually thought we'd let her fly a combat mission. Delusional. Absolutely delusional. Should have stayed in the kitchen, someone else said. More laughter. Sarah kept walking, her boots crunching in the sand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, she could hear the rumble of artillery. The war continued, indifferent to her humiliation. She thought about those 340 Marines. They were somebody's sons and daughters, somebody's brothers and sisters. They had families waiting for them at home. They had dreams and plans and futures, and they were going to die because nobody had the courage to save them. If you're enjoying this story of courage and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe. You won't believe what happens next. Sarah walked across the airfield, her mind racing. The old hangar sat at the edge of the base, half collapsed and forgotten. Everyone called it the boneyard, where broken equipment went to die. She pushed through the rusty door. The hinges screamed in protest. There, covered in dust and sand, sat a CH-53E Super Stallion helicopter. The massive machine looked ancient, its paint faded and peeling. One of the rotor blades had a visible crack running halfway down its length. Hydraulic fluid leaked from somewhere underneath, forming a dark pool on the concrete floor. The windscreen was scratched and cloudy, but Sarah could see past the decay. She could see what this machine had once been. What it could be again. You shouldn't be here. Sarah spun around. Master Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez stood in the doorway. At 62, he was the oldest Marine on the base, a weathered veteran with more combat hours than anyone else still serving. His face was lined like old leather, and his hands bore the scars of 40 years working on aircraft. He was also the only person who didn't treat her like garbage. Tommy, she said, that Super Stallion, is it flyable? Rodriguez walked closer, his boots echoing in the empty hangar. He moved with the slight limp of someone who'd survived 3 helicopter crashes. Maybe, maybe not. She's old, real old. Been sitting here for 8 months since the hydraulics failed. Nobody wants to fix her because she's scheduled for decommission. Why? I need her. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. For what? There are 340 Marines dying out there. Nobody will go get them. And you will? Somebody has to. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. He walked around the helicopter, running his hands along the fuselage, checking the landing gear, examining the rotors with an expert's eye. The main hydraulic line is shot. The fuel pumps are questionable. The avionics are from the 1980s. But I've been, let's call it, acquiring parts. Could have her running in maybe 2 hours, maybe. You'd help me? Kid, I've been watching you get treated like dirt for 3 years. I've seen you take every insult, every joke, every damn humiliation, and you never quit. You show up every day at 500. You do your job better than anyone in that tent. You never complain. You never cry. That tells me something about your character. He paused. Plus, I heard the radio. Those are our boys out there. Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This bird is barely holding together. The avionics are older than your parents. The armor plating has holes. The seats are torn. And even if we get her running, you're looking at a flight through a sandstorm into a hot LZ with enemy missiles. The survival odds are basically 0. I know. Rodriguez studied her face. You really think you can fly this? Sarah walked to the helicopter and ran her hand along the fuselage. Her fingers found the old unit insignia painted near the cockpit, a winged skull with the words Night Angels underneath. The paint was faded, barely visible under the dust, but she could still read it. Below the skull were hash marks, mission tallies. Hundreds of them. Something flickered in Rodriguez's eyes. Wait, you recognize that insignia? Sarah didn't answer. She climbed up into the cockpit and sat in the pilot's seat. The cushion was torn and springs poked through, but her hands found the controls automatically. Cyclic collective pedals, muscle memory flooding back after 3 years of pushing papers. Holy shit, Rodriguez whispered. You're her. You're the ghost. Sarah closed her eyes. That call sign. She hadn't heard it in 3 years. I don't know what you're talking about. Bullshit. I heard stories. 5 years ago, there was a pilot in the Night Angels, the Special Operations Unit, female, tiny, flew like the helicopter was part of her body. They said she could thread a needle in a hurricane. Set records that still stand, saved more lives than anyone could count. Then she just disappeared. They said it was medical discharge, but nobody believed it. Tommy, what happened? Sarah's hands tightened on the controls. The memories came flooding back. The missions. The adrenaline. The feeling of being the best at what she did. And then the politics. The betrayal. Politics happened. The unit commander's son wanted my spot. I was making him look bad. Every mission, every evaluation, I scored higher. He couldn't stand it. So they found a way to push me out. Failed a medical eval that I'd passed 20 times before. Suddenly I had vertigo issues, inner ear problems. Couldn't fly combat missions anymore. The flight surgeon who signed off on it got promoted. The commander's son got my spot. And I got buried in logistics so deep nobody would ever find me. Those bastards. It doesn't matter now. What matters is getting this bird in the air. Rodriguez climbed up beside her. His old hands moved over the instrument panel, checking connections. If you're really the ghost, then maybe, just maybe those Marines have a chance. But Chen, if we do this, it's unauthorized. Court-martial level unauthorized. They'll throw both of us in prison. We could do 20 years at Leavenworth. Then we better make it count. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Give me 2 hours. I'll get her running. 1 hour and 53 minutes later, the Super Stallion's engines roared to life. The sound was like thunder, rolling across the base. It was a sound that hadn't been heard in 8 months. The old helicopter shook and rattled, but the engines held steady. The sound brought people running from across the base. Colonel Davidson burst into the hangar with Major Williams, Morrison, and half a dozen security personnel. Their faces showed shock and anger. What the hell is going on here? Davidson shouted over the engine noise. He had to yell to be heard over the roar of the turbines. Sarah looked down from the cockpit. She'd already completed the pre-flight checklist. All systems were barely functional, but functional enough. I'm going to get our Marines, sir. Lieutenant, I did not authorize this mission. Shut down that aircraft immediately. With respect, sir, I'm not asking for authorization. That's a direct order, Chen. Sir, those Marines have been waiting for 2 hours. Their last transmission was 15 minutes ago. They're dying. I'm going. Davidson's face turned red. A vein pulsed in his temple. That aircraft is non-operational. It's not even on the flight roster. And you? You're not qualified for combat missions. Rodriguez stepped forward, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. Sir, that equipment is condemned and scheduled for decommission. Whatever happens is just an unfortunate mechanical malfunction. Nobody authorized anything. Can't court-martial someone for a mechanical failure that caused an aircraft to accidentally become operational. Davidson's jaw worked, but no words came out. Major Williams stepped forward. Colonel, she's never flown combat. She'll die out there and she won't save anyone. She'll just add one more casualty to the list. Sarah met his eyes. Her small hands gripped the controls with absolute confidence. You don't know what I can do, Major. Nobody here does. You never asked. You never checked my records. You just saw a small woman and decided I couldn't fly. Morrison laughed, but it sounded forced. Chen, you can barely reach the pedals. You really think you can fly a combat mission in a broken helicopter? Sarah pulled the collective and the Super Stallion lifted off the ground. The old bird shuddered and groaned, but she held together. Dust and sand swirled through the hangar in a blinding cloud. Sarah maneuvered out of the hangar and into the darkening sky with smooth precision. The radio exploded with chatter. Unauthorized aircraft. Return to base immediately. Chen, this is insane. Somebody stop her! Base security, pursue that aircraft. Sarah switched frequencies, tuning to the emergency channel. Hawk 3-7, this is Guardian Angel. I'm inbound to your position. ETA 20 minutes. Static. Then a weak, disbelieving voice. Guardian Angel, did you say inbound? Are you serious? Command said no rescue was coming. Dead serious, Hawk 3-7. I'm coming to get you. All of you, hold on. Fight hard. I'm coming, a pause. Then roger that, Guardian Angel, we'll be here. We're not going anywhere. The sandstorm was rolling in from the west, a massive wall of brown death that would reduce visibility to zero. Sarah flew straight toward it. Behind her, the sun was setting, turning the sky blood red. The old super stallion rattled and shook. Warning lights flickered on the instrument panel like a Christmas tree. The hydraulic pressure was fluctuating. The number 2 engine was running hot, temperature gauge climbing into the red zone. The radar was barely functional, showing ghost images. But Sarah's hands were steady. This was what she'd been born to do. She dropped low, following the terrain contours. The flight to the stranded Marines required threading through a narrow valley, flanked on both sides by steep cliffs rising 500 feet high. The winds funneled through, creating violent turbulence that would tear apart a less experienced pilot. The helicopter bucked and rolled like a bull trying to throw its rider. Sarah compensated with tiny adjustments, reading the air currents, anticipating the gusts before they hit. Her hands and feet moved in constant coordination, cyclic and collective, and pedals working together in a dance she'd performed 1,000 times. Missile launch. The warning system blared. The tone was piercing, insistent. Sarah saw the smoke trail rising from the ridgeline to her left. Surface-to-air missile. Chinese-made HN-5, tracking her infrared signature. She had maybe 3 seconds before impact. She threw the Super Stallion into a dive, dropping like a stone toward the valley floor. The missile screamed past, missing by meters. She felt the shock wave as it impacted the cliff face behind her, sending rock and shrapnel flying. Guardian Angel to Hawk 3-7. I'm taking fire. What's your exact position? We're in a dried riverbed, coordinates transmitted. Guardian. The LZ is tiny and surrounded by enemy positions. You won't be able to land. There's not enough room for a bird this size. Watch me. Sarah crested the ridge and saw the situation below. It was worse than she'd imagined. The Marines were pinned in a narrow gorge, surrounded on 3 sides by enemy forces. Muzzle flashes lit up the growing darkness like fireflies. Tracers cut through the air in red streams, crisscrossing in deadly patterns. She could see bodies, too many bodies, lying motionless in the sand. The only clear space was maybe 50 feet across, studded with rocks and bordered by steep walls. A space designed for maybe a small helicopter, not a CH-53E Super Stallion, one of the largest helicopters in the world. That's not a landing zone, Sarah muttered to herself. That's a coffin. But 340 Marines were counting on her. She could see them now. Tiny figures huddled behind rocks, firing back at the enemy positions. Some weren't moving. Some were being dragged by their brothers in arms. She brought the Super Stallion around, fighting the winds that tried to slam her into the canyon walls. The old bird groaned and protested. More warning lights illuminated the cockpit. The number 2 engine temperature was critical now. Enemy fire concentrated on her. The distinctive crack of AK-47s. The heavier thump of machine guns. Bullets punched through the thin aluminum skin of the helicopter. She could hear them hitting, feel the impacts through the airframe. Something sparked in the back. The smell of smoke filled the cockpit. Sarah ignored it all. Her entire world narrowed to the landing zone. Everything else disappeared. There was only the helicopter, the ground, and the space between them. She brought the massive helicopter down, inch by careful inch. The rotor wash kicked up blinding clouds of sand. Visibility went to 0. She was flying completely blind now, using only muscle memory and feel. The slight resistance in the cyclic, the feedback through the pedals, the vibration through the seat. The wheels touched ground. Hard. The helicopter bounced and Sarah fought to keep it steady. Go, 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 she heard over the radio. Marines poured toward the helicopter, carrying their wounded. Sarah kept the rotors spinning at full power, ready to lift off at any second. Bullets continued to strike the fuselage. The pinging sound was constant now, like hail on a tin roof. The number 2 engine was definitely on fire now. She could see the warning light, smell the burning oil. She activated the fire suppression system. Foam flooded the engine compartment. We're loaded. Someone shouted from the back. Go, go, go! Sarah pulled collective. The Super Stallion strained, fighting to lift the massive weight. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The engine screamed. The rotors spun at maximum RPM. But they weren't moving. They were too heavy. The old helicopter, already damaged, couldn't generate enough lift. "Come on, girl," Sarah whispered, adjusting the pitch. "Come on, I know you're tired. I know you're hurt. But I need you. They need you. Fly for me." One more time, the super stallion shuddered. The entire airframe shook. Then impossibly, miraculously, she lifted off. Inch by inch, foot by foot, they rose into the air, but they weren't done. Not by a long shot. The radio crackled. "Guardian Angel, we've got 40 more critical wounded still on the ground. Multiple amputees. They can't move. You have to come back." Sarah looked at her instruments. The number 2 engine was shut down completely, still smoldering. Hydraulic pressure was in the red zone. They'd taken damage to the tail rotor. She could feel it in the sluggish response. The fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should, which meant they had a leak somewhere. She keyed the radio. "Understood, Hawk 37. Returning for second run." Behind her in the cargo bay, someone said, "Is she insane? This bird won't make another trip. We're falling apart." Sarah flew back to base, barely keeping the damaged helicopter in the air. Every control input felt mushy, delayed. She was fighting the machine every second. She landed hard on the airfield and the Marines poured out, carrying their wounded toward the waiting medical teams. Colonel Davidson was there, his face a mixture of fury and shocked disbelief. "Chen, that aircraft is done, finished. You're not going back out." "That's a direct order." Sarah didn't shut down the engines. "Sir, 40 Marines are still dying out there. Look at this helicopter. It's falling apart. You've got one engine, no hydraulics, and bullet holes everywhere. It'll make one more run." "No, absolutely not. I'm ordering you to stand down." "That's final, Lieutenant." Sarah met his eyes. "Sir, with all due respect, you can court-martial me when I get back. Right now, I have a mission to complete. Those are our Marines out there." She lifted off again before he could respond, the damaged super stallion struggling into the air like a wounded bird. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The story is about to reach its incredible climax. The second run was infinitely worse. The sandstorm had fully arrived, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Sarah flew by instruments and instinct alone, the damaged super stallion screaming in protest with every maneuver. The windscreen was completely obscured by sand. The number 2 engine was gone. She was flying on one engine. The hydraulics were failing, which meant every control movement required all her strength. The flight controls, normally light and responsive, now felt like moving concrete blocks. Enemy fire intensified. They knew she was coming back. They were ready this time. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked past the cockpit, missing by inches. The explosion lit up the sandstorm like lightning. Sarah jinked left, and the sudden movement caused something to break in the tail rotor assembly. She heard the crack, felt the helicopter yaw violently to the right. She was losing control. Sarah fought the controls with everything she had. Her small hands, the hands that Morrison had mocked as too weak, gripped the cyclic with iron strength. Every muscle in her tiny frame strained against the forces trying to tear the helicopter apart. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold. "I'm not losing you," she growled to the dying machine. "Not today, not ever. We're getting those Marines. You hear me? We're bringing them home." She brought the super stallion into the hot zone one more time. The landing was rougher, harder. Something in the landing gear broke with an audible snap. They were tilted at a dangerous angle, leaning to the left. "Load the wounded," Sarah called back. 30 seconds, that's all we have." Marines scrambled to get the injured aboard. Sarah watched the instrument panel disintegrate in front of her eyes. Electrical systems failing. Hydraulics completely gone now. The last engine was overheating catastrophically. A bullet punched through the side window, showering her with glass. Another hit her seat, missing her by inches. Another struck the instrument panel, destroying the altimeter. "We're loaded," someone screamed from the back. Sarah pulled power. The super stallion lifted off, lurching and swaying drunkenly. They'd taken even more damage. She could feel it in every response, every input. The helicopter was dying beneath her. Bleeding hydraulic fluid and fuel, engines screaming. Worse, she'd taken a bullet. Sarah looked down and saw blood spreading across her flight suit, a dark stain growing below her ribs. She couldn't feel it, adrenaline was masking the pain, but the wound was there just below her ribcage on the left side. "Stay with me," she whispered. She wasn't sure if she was talking to the helicopter or herself. Maybe both. The flight back was a nightmare of pain and determination. Sarah fought waves of dizziness. The instrument panel was mostly dark now. She was flying a nearly destroyed helicopter with one failing engine. No hydraulics, a damaged tail rotor, and a bullet in her side. Blood loss was making her vision blur. She blinked hard, trying to focus. The base appeared ahead, lights cutting through the sandstorm like beacons. Guardian Angel, you are cleared for emergency landing. Medical is standing by. Fire crews are positioned. Sarah lined up for approach. The Super Stallion was barely responding now. The controls felt loose, disconnected, like steering through water. She was essentially trying to control a falling rock. 50 feet up, the last engine quit. Just stopped. No warning, just silence except for the whistling wind. They were dropping, falling, dying in the air. Sarah performed an auto-rotation, using the falling motion to keep the rotors spinning just enough to control the descent. It was one of the hardest maneuvers in aviation, requiring split-second timing, perfect coordination, and nerves of steel. She'd done it 1,000 times in training. Never in a destroyed helicopter while bleeding out. Never with no hydraulics, no instruments, and a damaged tail rotor. 20 feet. The ground rushing up 10 feet. She could see people scattering 5 feet. She pulled back on the cyclic, flaring the nose, trading forward speed for lift. The Super Stallion hit the ground hard. The landing gear collapsed completely. The helicopter slid sideways across the tarmac in a shower of sparks and screaming metal, leaving a trail of debris and fluid. Finally, mercifully, they stopped. Sarah sat in the cockpit, her vision tunneling to a pinpoint. She'd done it. All 340 Marines. Every single one, safe. Then the darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. Sarah woke up in the base hospital 3 days later. Colonel Davidson was sitting beside her bed, and he looked like he hadn't slept in those 3 days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his uniform wrinkled. "Easy, Lieutenant," he said as she tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her side, and she gasped. "You've got a cracked rib and a bullet wound that almost hit your liver, plus about 15 stitches in your arm from flying glass. 3 more stitches in your forehead. You need to rest." The Marine, Sarah's voice was hoarse, raw, all alive. Every single one of them. 340 Marines. Because of you. Davidson's voice was thick with emotion. Tears stood in his eyes. "Chen, I need to apologize. I underestimated you, badly, we all did, and those men would be dead if you'd listened to me." Sarah lay back on the pillow, exhausted. "How much trouble am I in, sir?" Davidson smiled, and it transformed his face. "Well, that's the thing. Turns out it's hard to court-martial someone when 340 Marines are willing to testify on her behalf, plus their families. Plus, Master Sergeant Rodriguez's story about a mechanical malfunction is technically plausible. Barely. And the media got wind of the story. CNN, Fox News, everybody. You're kind of a national hero now. I'm not a hero. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly what a hero says." Davidson stood up. "There's someone else who wants to see you." He opened the door. Staff Sergeant Morrison walked in, his head down, his usual swagger completely gone. "Lieutenant Chen," he said quietly, I need to apologize. The way I treated you, the things I said, the names I called you, I was wrong. Completely, totally wrong. You're 10 times the Marine I'll ever be. 100 times. He pulled something from his pocket, the unit patch from his uniform. "I'd be honored if you'd accept this. You've earned it more than any of us." Sarah was too tired to be angry. She'd let go of anger somewhere over that desert. "Apology accepted, Sergeant. We all make mistakes. Learn from it." After Morrison left, looking relieved, Sarah noticed something on her bedside table, a folder marked "Classified" in red letters. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Orders from Marine Corps headquarters in Quantico. She was being reassigned to a special operations unit. The Night Angels were being reformed after being disbanded 3 years ago, and they wanted her as the squadron commander. There was also a note, handwritten in elegant script. "The ghost flies again. Welcome back to where you belong, Captain Chen. Your country needs you. Admiral James Morrison, USMC Captain." They'd promoted her 2 full ranks, skipping right over first lieutenant. Sarah smiled and closed her eyes, letting sleep take her. 6 months later. The old Super Stallion sat in a place of honor at Marine Corps Base Quantico, fully restored to her former glory. She'd been completely rebuilt, her scars repaired but her history preserved. Every bullet hole had been patched. The engines were new. The hydraulics worked perfectly, but the old Night Angels insignia remained, and the mission tallies had been carefully preserved. A bronze plaque beside her read, Guardian Angel piloted by Captain Sarah Chen in the rescue of 340 Marines under heavy enemy fire. A testament to courage, skill, and the warrior spirit that refuses to accept defeat or abandon brothers in arms. Let all who see this aircraft remember, true strength is not measured in size, but in the size of one's heart. Sarah stood before the helicopter in her dress blues, 3 rows of medals on her chest including the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. The ceremony was over. Crowds had dispersed. She was alone with the machine that had carried her into hell and back. "Thank you," she whispered, touching the fuselage like greeting an old friend. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Ghost, we have a situation. Classified, eyes only. Report to Hangar 7 at 0300 hours. Come alone. Bring your flight suit. This one's going to be interesting." Command. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she looked up at the restored Super Stallion, gleaming in the afternoon sun. A new mission, already. The Night Angels were being called back into action. She texted back, "On my way." As she walked away, the setting sun caught the Night Angels' insignia on the helicopter, making the winged skull glow like fire. Behind her, the restored Super Stallion stood proud and ready, a monument to what determination and skill could accomplish against impossible odds. And somewhere in the shadows of Hangar 7, something waited. Something that would test everything Sarah had learned. Something that would prove her previous mission was just the beginning of her story. Not the end. The ghost was back, and this time, the whole world would know her name, but first, she had to discover what waited in Hangar 7. What new impossible challenge would test her skills to their absolute limit? What secret mission required the legendary ghost to return from her paperwork exile? The answers waited in the darkness. And Sarah Chen, the tiny woman they'd called too small and too weak, walked toward them with her head held high.